Hey guys, this is Rick Galvez and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, we will be talking about how you can turn scales into all sorts of killer extreme metal riffs, particularly within the black metal and death metal subgenres. So the first concept we'll be talking about in this video is chugging on the low E string, as well as alternating between different scale notes in different positions on the fretboard. Mostly around the open position here, as well as around the 7 frets of the A string. Also, just so you know, my guitar is tuned down a whole step to D standard. So even though I'll be calling this an E, that is actually a D. But for the sake of simplicity, I will be referring to all the strings and the notes on the fretboard as if this guitar was an E standard tuning. So for example, I could chug on the low E string like that. So far, I just used 4 notes out of the E natural minor scale. So E, F sharp, G, E sharp. And you can go to other notes in the scale too and then chug on those for a bit. So for example, like I went to the C, which is the 6th scale degree of E natural minor. So I was going back and forth between the low E string, as well as starting on the E, on the 7th fret of the A string, and the other notes from the E harmonic minor scale across the A string. So if I were to improvise something, using this method, it would sound something like this. An example in my own music, under the name Malice Divine, that uses this concept is a riff from the song called Quantum Manifestation. And it sounds a little something like this. So again, in this riff, I was playing around with the low E string as well as going up a few steps in the scale, like for example from the root up to the 3rd. Then going up to the 4th here. Descending a little bit, and also skipping. So you can also skip around, between different notes in the whatever scale you're using. So it doesn't have to be completely all the way up, Like, for example, it doesn't have to be, always going up, every single successive pitch in the scale. It can skip around a little bit. Like, for example, in this riff from Quantum Manifestation by Malice Divine. You can also use this concept and apply it to just one string as well. So another riff from the song Quantum Manifestation that uses that concept is this one. So in this riff, I was going back and forth between the low E string, as well as various different notes in the E Hungarian minor scale, which is just like your normal harmonic minor scale, except that we have a augmented 4th instead of a perfect 4th, which in this case would be the 6th fret of the low E string, which gives us that diminished 5th sound. That type of sound that is very common in metal music. So the next concept I'll be talking about is taking the notes of a scale and then using tremolo picking in order to create a very melodic riff out of this, which is excellent for black metal and death metal music. For this example, I'm going to use the Phrygian scale, and we'll see what happens. So an example of using tremolo picking to create a riff from a scale is the song Usurping the Paragon from my solo project Malice Divine. In the chorus riff, I'm using predominantly tremolo picking, interspersed with some power chords here and there, but mostly based off of tremolo picking through notes in the scale, and it goes something like this. A really cool thing that you can do with scales when it comes to creating really awesome metal riffs is you can build something called dyads out of the notes from a scale. And essentially what a dyad is a 2-note chord. Now you might be thinking, well, don't I already do that from playing power chords? Like a root and fifth power chord based off a scale? Yeah, that a power chord is technically considered a dyad. But what I'm talking about here is, in particular, major and minor dyads, which are essentially like major and minor chords, but without the fifth. The same concept can be applied to, seconds and fourths as well. So, for example, if I were to play something in the key of E minor, so I could start with a power chord. I can go to the fourth, yeah, third, and then the second. So essentially, how you build dyads from scales is that you take a note in a scale and then you skip the next one. So in this case, we're starting on E in the E natural minor scale, for example. The next note in the scale would be F sharp. So we skip that, and then we get to the one after that, which is G. So we got the note E, G. But obviously we're going to have to play the G here on the D string like this. The same thing applies to other notes in the scale. So if I were to start from the 7th of the scale, which is the D note on the 5th fret of the A string, skip the next note of scale, which is D, get to F sharp. And this is a very common technique that you especially find in a lot of black metal music. You definitely find lots of riffs based off of dyads in black metal, and definitely other genres of metal too. Like, for example, the main riff to the song Araya by Metallica is definitely based off of a lot of major and minor dyads. And this example is from the song Triumphant Return, and it goes something like this. So that riff is mostly based off a natural minor scale, but there is a little bit of harmonic minor thrown in there, mostly at the end, with the that movement there. So the next concept that we'll be talking about today is something that really I haven't seen anybody else really talk about, you know, on YouTube or social media, as far as it comes to, like, you know, creating riffs or even songwriting. And that's something called contrapuntal motion. This is something that I learned about back in my university days when I was a music major at York University in Toronto. And essentially what contrapuntal motion is when you have two different lines, and then they can either go, you know, in separate ways or together, or one line can stay the same, and then another can go up, you know. So it's essentially like different ways that like two particular lines can really like can move together. So here's an example that uses contrapuntal motion. It's a riff that I wrote not too long ago that very well may end up on the next Malice Divine album. And it goes a little something like this. So with contrapuntal motion, we have similar motion, which means that two notes will be moving in the same direction, but not in the same interval. So an example of similar motion would be something like this. Let's say I start off with an E minor dyad. So that, again, that is and then I go to an F sharp and a B here. So as you can see, both these notes, both notes that I started off with, E and G, yes, they both go up in the scale, but not by the same interval. So one is going up just one note in the scale. The next is going up from G to B. So that's skipping a note in the scale. That would be an example of similar motion. Next up would be oblique motion, which is when you have two notes, one of them moves, but the other one does not. So an example of oblique motion would be something like this. So in that example, I was starting off with an E power chord, but then the highest note that I was playing was moving around to different notes in the scale. Well, the lowest one, the E, was staying the same. Again, it was like this. So one note was staying the same, while the other was moving around in the scale. There is also contrapuntal motion, which is where two notes will go in different directions. So for example, if I were to play an A power chord on the low E string and the A strings, like this. But now using the A harmonic minor scale, if my index finger were to go down a fret to the 7th of the scale, and then I was going to go up from the 5th of the scale on the 7th fret of the A string to the 6th, which is the 8th fret, like this. So That would be an example of contrary motion, because one note is going lower in the scale and then the other is going higher in the scale. And then the last example of contrapuntal motion would be similar motion. So an example of this would be just taking a power chord shape and then shifting around within the scale. So for example, if I were to play something in the E Hungarian minor scale, like something like that, that would be an example of parallel motion, because everything is moving in the same direction. So I'm literally just taking, for this example, a power chord and then shifting around the scale. So an example that I have in music, in my own music for that matter, is the riff behind the first solo in the Malice of Lion song Quantum Manifestation. And it goes a little something like this. So another one of my favorite ways to turn scales into really awesome killer metal riffs is to imply chords that are found within the scales. So this is something that I really don't see talked about very often, to be completely honest with you. You know, just the fact that like you can apply chord progressions within scales. So for this example, I'm going to be taking this riff from the Malice of Lion song Parasitic Demons, and I'm essentially tremolo picking through various different notes in the scale that make up particular chords. So for example, the beginning part of the riff goes like, so that's implying an F sharp minor chord in the key of F sharp Phrygian. Again, goes like this. And then I'm going to here 5, 7, and 9. So that's the next part of the riff. So that's implying an A major chord. And then I'm going down to here to imply an F sharp minor chord. So far in this riff, I'm implying F sharp minor, A major, and then F sharp minor. Sorry, I originally called this F sharp minor because I was thinking of this as if it was in D standard tuning, but yeah, this would be G sharp minor. So G sharp minor, A major, and F sharp. Then I'm going up to here to imply a B major. Back to F sharp minor. So. And then towards the end, implying an E major, with a little bit of minor at the end with the G there. So in total, we got this. And like I mentioned when I was describing dyads, to create triads, 3-note chords out of scales, again, you just skip a note in the scale. So if I were starting on the 4th fret of the low E string, let's say I'm trying to create something in the key of G sharp minor, then that would be G sharp here, skipping the next note, hitting into the next one, which is B, skipping the next note again, and then getting to G sharp. here is another riff that I wrote not too long ago, which very well may end up on the next Malice Divine album, as uses this concept of implying chords found within scales. It goes something like this. Another one of my favorite things to do with scales to create really cool metal riffs is to play around with octaves. So an example of this would be this new riff that I wrote very recently. It goes something a little like this. So there, I was playing around with the notes in the B harmonic minor scale. So starting here, and with octaves, to find an octave from the low E string, you just go up 2 strings, 2 frets. So in this case, the starting note of a scale here, B harmonic minor, would be 7th fret. So that means the octave of that would be the 9th. So I was doing something like this. So starting on the higher octave, throwing in a little bit of a low E chug in there because that's in the key of B harmonic minor, so that works. Another one of my favorite things to do with octaves is to play around with them along with other intervals in a scale. So for example, this riff from the Malice Divine song End Time also uses a lot of perfect fifths and minor sixths. Also, when it comes to riff writing, it's important not to limit yourself to just one particular idea at a time. It's really important to be able to mix and match different ideas along with different notes from different scales in order to create unique sounds. An example of this would be this bridge riff from the Malice Divine song At One with Infinity. So in that riff, I was combining different concepts of chugging on the low E string, as well as going to different notes within the scale. And this position mostly of the fretboard, I was doing some tremolo picking, and also I wasn't relying on just one scale. I was also incorporating flat seconds in there, even though it's originally a harmonic minor type of riff, but I like adding in some flat seconds every now and then, even to riffs that are based off of, like, you know, natural minor, harmonic minor, Hungarian minor, because it just adds like even more like tension and darkness to the riff. So I really like, you know, throwing in minor seconds whenever the opportunity calls for it as well. Another example of this would be the verse riff to the Malice Divine song Triumphant Return. So this riff combines the concepts of chugging on the low E string while also using other octaves of that root note, going to other notes in the scale in between the chugs and the low E string, as well as playing around with octaves and fifths in different notes of the scale. And the riff goes something like this. Another cool thing you can do to create some really awesome and killer metal riffs is to take a pre-existing rhythm and just to apply notes from any given scale to it. So for example, let's take this rhythm. So now let's play around with notes in the E Hungarian minor scale with that rhythm. So before you go about applying these different concepts from this video to your riff writing, you want to make sure to have a good understanding of these scales, or whatever scales you like really, in different positions and different ways of playing it across the fretboard. You can go about this, and should go about this, in different ways. So for example, let's start off with playing these scales in terms of boxes. So here's an example of what I mean by that. So I got this one little position here that I'm playing the scale in. And then you can find different starting points for whatever key, whatever scale you want. So for example, we got another E note down here. As well as another one up here. And then you can also think of scales in terms of playing across a string. You know, start off with, for example, again with the E natural minor scale on the open low E string, and then just simply just go up a scale across the string, so like this. So this way, this will allow you to be able to go between different positions of the scale and different areas of the fretboard, which will give you more creative freedom in your riff writing. Thank you for watching this YouTube video. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to give this video a thumbs up. I'm also available for private one-on-one guitar lessons, which you can sign up for on my website, www.rickgalvis.com, or by sending me an email at rickgalvismusic@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.